Behind every loan to a struggling nation, behind every infrastructure deal worth billions, there's a signature, a stamp, decision. But whose? The World Bank claims it serves the world's poorest. It promises development, prosperity, a better future. But what if I told you the World Bank isn't controlled by the countries it claims to help? What if the real power doesn't sit in the boardroom at all? Today, we're pulling back the curtain on one of the most powerful and least understood institutions on Earth. By the end of this video, you'll never see global finance the same way again. July 1944. World War II is still raging. But in a luxury hotel in New Hampshire, representatives from 44 nations gather for a secret meeting. Their mission: rebuild the global economy after the war. Two institutions are born: the International Monetary Fund and the World Bank. On paper, the World Bank exists to reduce poverty, to fund roads, schools, hospitals in developing nations. Noble, right? Here's the catch. The World Bank isn't a charity. It's a lender. And every loan comes with strings attached. Today, the World Bank holds influence over more than 170 countries. It controls hundreds of billions of dollars. Its decisions shape the fate of entire continents. But here's the question no one asks. Who decides where that money goes? Officially, it's the member countries. Each nation gets votes based on how much capital they contribute. Sounds democratic. But here's the reality. 5 countries control over 35% of the vote. And one country alone holds veto power over major decisions: the United States. Let's break down how this machine actually works. Imagine the World Bank as a private club. To join, you buy shares. The more shares you own, the more votes you get. The US owns about 16% of the shares. Japan has around 7%. China, Germany, France, and the UK follow. Together, these nations form what's called the G7 bloc, the richest countries on the planet. Now here's where it gets interesting. The World Bank is run by a president. And by tradition, not law, just tradition. That president is always an American, nominated by the US government. Always, since 1944. Every single World Bank president has been a US citizen. Many have been former Wall Street executives, Treasury officials, or Washington insiders. Think about that. An institution that claims to serve the developing world is run by someone chosen by the world's richest country. But it doesn't stop there. Beneath the president sits the board of executive directors, 24 people who approve every major loan and policy. The US gets its own seat. So do Japan, Germany, France, and the UK. Meanwhile, 47 African countries share just 2 seats. This isn't a conspiracy. It's the design. Now let's talk about how loans actually work. When a country needs money, say to build a dam or respond to a crisis, it applies to the World Bank. But the money doesn't come free. It comes with conditions. These are called structural adjustment programs, or SAPs. The World Bank might say, "We'll give you the loan, but first you need to cut government spending, privatize your water system, open your markets to foreign corporations." Sounds technical, but here's what it means in practice. A government cuts healthcare funding to meet loan terms. Hospitals close. People die. A country is forced to sell its state-owned oil company to private investors, often Western firms. Local farmers lose subsidies, can't compete with cheap imported goods, and go bankrupt. This isn't theory. It's happened in dozens of countries. Argentina, Greece, Zambia, Ghana. The pattern repeats. Crisis, loan conditions, dependency. So who benefits? Follow the money. World Bank projects often go to multinational corporations, construction giants, consulting firms, energy companies, many based in the same countries that control the bank. It's a closed loop. But there's always a breaking point. Let's go to 2001. Argentina, for a decade. Argentina followed every rule the World Bank and IMF laid out. Privatization, deregulation, austerity. The economy boomed for a while. Then it collapsed. Unemployment hit 25%. Millions lost their savings overnight. The government defaulted on its debt. People took to the streets. They banged pots and pans, shouting, "Que se vayan todos." They all must go. They weren't just angry at their government. They were angry at the institutions that designed the policies. Argentina isn't alone. In the 1980s and 90s, the World Bank pushed SAPs across Africa. The result? Economies shrank. Poverty increased. Life expectancy dropped. Critics started calling it economic colonialism because, here's the uncomfortable truth, the World Bank doesn't just lend money, it shapes policy, it rewrites laws, it opens markets, and when countries can't repay, they lose sovereignty. Land is sold off, resources are extracted. Profits leave the country. Meanwhile, the people who made the decisions, sitting in Washington in air-conditioned offices, never face the consequences. So we return to the original question. Who really controls the World Bank? Is it the member countries? Or is it the wealthy nations that fund it, appoint its leaders, and benefit from its policies? Is it the technocrats and economists who design the loans? Or is it the corporations that win the contracts? Here's where it gets even darker. Some researchers point to something else: informal influence. Think tanks, lobbying groups, private investors. There's a revolving door between Wall Street, the US Treasury, and the World Bank. Executives move seamlessly between Goldman Sachs and global institutions. Policy ideas are shaped in private meetings, then implemented through official channels. This isn't a shadowy cabal in a basement. It's a network, legal, transparent in structure, but opaque in operation. And that's what makes it so powerful. So what does this mean for the world today? The World Bank still lends billions every year. It still shapes economies. It still holds power. But the consequences are real. Debt, right now, dozens of developing countries are drowning in debt. Much of it owed to institutions like the World Bank and IMF. When debt payments consume 40%, 50%, even 60% of a national budget, there's nothing left for schools, for hospitals, for the future. Dependency. Countries that rely on World Bank loans become locked into a cycle. Borrow, spend, struggle to repay. Borrow again. They lose the ability to make independent economic decisions, inequality, while the World Bank claims to fight poverty. The wealth gap between rich and poor nations has widened over the past 50 years. Resources flow out of developing countries through debt repayment, corporate profits, and unequal trade deals. But here's the twist. The world is changing. China has launched its own development bank, the Asian Infrastructure Investment Bank. The BRICS nations, Brazil, Russia, India, China, South Africa, are building alternatives to the Western-dominated financial system. Countries are starting to ask, do we need the World Bank at all? And that question terrifies the people in power. Because if the World Bank loses its influence, so does the network behind it. So does the system that's kept the global economy running for 80 years. The old order is cracking, and no one knows what comes next. So here's the unsettling truth. The World Bank isn't controlled by one person. It's not a conspiracy with a single mastermind pulling the strings. It's a system designed by the wealthy, operated by the powerful, and justified by the language of help. The scariest part, it works because it's invisible. Most people never think about the World Bank. They don't see the loans, the conditions, the ripple effects. But those effects shape everything. Where you live, what you pay for food, whether your country has clean water. The World Bank doesn't control the world alone. But it's one of many institutions that do. And until we ask who benefits, until we question who really makes the decisions. The system stays in place, hidden in plain sight. So here's my question for you. If you could redesign the World Bank from scratch, who would you put in charge? Drop your answer in the comments. And if this video made you think twice about global finance, hit that like button and stay with us, because the truth is out there. You just have to know where to look.